Sencha and Gyokuro are both types of Japanese green teas, but they are very different from one another. Sencha is the most common type of green tea in Japan, and Gyokuro is one of the rarest and hardest to produce. In this video, we're going to be comparing these two teas based on their taste and appearance to see what makes them unique. We'll also make a recommendation as to which one you might want to try for yourself. Let's get started. Okay, so what we have here is two different types of Japanese green teas. On the left we have a Sencha, and on the right we have a Gyokuro. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using the Henta Saemidori Sencha from Mr. Henta in Kirishima. And on the Gyokuro side, we'll be using the Gyokuro Cha Musume from Mr. Sakamoto in Shibushi. So I want to compare a few different things about these teas. Mostly I'm going to be comparing the taste, but I also want to be comparing the leaves a little bit. So if you take a look at these leaves, you'll notice on the Gyokuro side we have much larger leaves, much more tightly rolled leaves. So here you're noticing, some kind of needle-shaped leaves, some longer leaves, but mostly it's kind of like leaf pieces. And then on this side you have these really long trademark Gyokuro leaves. So these are tightly rolled. They go through an extra rolling process as well. So to get that kind of pine needle shape, it takes an extra machine, a specialized machine. So also the color, you may notice the Gyokuro side is going to be much darker than the Sencha. And the reason for this is that this is a basically unshaded tea. It might be shaded for a few days before the harvest just to kind of take the edge off. And this is going to be a long shaded. It has to be shaded for at least 3 weeks to be considered a Gyokuro. During this shading process, the taste becomes much sweeter, it becomes much more savory. The tea produces more caffeine, but it also produces more chlorophyll as well. So the leaves are going to take on this darker color. I'll be using 60 degrees Celsius for each cup, just making sure I have the right water temperature. I'm actually starting with 70 degrees like I've done in a past experiment, because when you pour it into a glass to measure it out, you're actually going to be dropping the temperature by about 10 degrees Celsius. So this is a trick. If you don't have a thermometer, you can transfer the water into another glass, and as it cools, just for like a few seconds or so, it's going to drop the temperature by about 10 degrees Celsius. So, in theory, if you're starting out with boiling water, 100 degrees Celsius, you can pour it into 4 different cups. So transfer it to 1 cup, then transfer it to 3 more, and then use it. In theory, you'll be at about 60 degrees Celsius. So that's kind of the perfect temperature for Gyokuro and many different Sencha teas as well. So that's going to be the temperature we're using. 5 grams of leaves, which is about this much. This is kind of an eyeballed estimate. And, about 150 milliliters of water, maybe a little bit less. I like to taste with a little bit less so it's very kind of dense and I really get a good assessment of the flavor. And then we're going to be using a brewing time of 2 minutes for the Gyokuro and 1 minute for the Sencha. Okay, so I have my 2 cups of tea here. On the left, again, the Sencha, and on the right, the Gyokuro. First thing I notice is that the Gyokuro is maybe got a little bit more of a greenish hue to it, but they're both pretty yellow overall. So we're not looking at like a Fukumushi Sencha that's this intense green color. We're looking at 2 kind of pretty normal Japanese green tea colors. So first I want to start by smelling the leaves, because this is something I noticed with Gyokuro actually. Okay, so the Gyokuro leaves, very strong in this vegetal seaweedy flavor. Interesting. From the Sencha, I'm getting much more of this kind of cereal note. So it's almost like if you were to smell like almost like warm oats or something like that. It's a very like starchy. You have a little hint of this kind of vegetal flavor, but it's actually much more starchy, much more of that grain flavor. And then the dry leaves themselves, so this one right here, I can really get a sense just smelling the dry leaves, which normally you don't get a whole lot. You really get a sense of the differences between these 2 teas, because you can really just kind of smell I don't know what it is exactly, but It's almost like you're smelling kind of like the theanine coming off of the leaves, because you can tell when you have a really long shaded Gyokuro or even maybe a Kabuse Sencha, you can just kind of smell it coming off the leaves. So good quality indicators all around. I'm really looking forward to this tasting. So let's start with the Gyokuro. Actually, let's start with the Sencha. Very light, sweet, a little bit milky in the finish, so very smooth, very sweet, and I do get that starchiness. It almost has this, like, I would say like a sweet corn, kind of sweet starchiness to it, and a milky finish. Okay, let's compare that to the Gyokuro. Oh yeah, really just dives into this deep, savory flavor. So the taste kind of starts up and then just drops right away into this savory umami flavor that Gyokuro is known for. And then the finish is like, it's a little bit floury in the finish. I'm noticing with this year's harvest of the Cha Musume, it does get a little bit floury, which I think is really nice, just to kind of change it up a little bit. Something you're not normally expecting with a Gyokuro, to kind of have that flowery, floral finish to it. But the flavor is really dominated by this savory umami note, and also the sweetness as well. So they're both very sweet teas, but this one here, you're clearly not getting that strong savory flavor that you would with a Gyokuro. And this really only comes from that longer shading process. But these are both very smooth, very drinkable, very sweet teas. I'm interested to see how the second steeping goes. Okay, so here's the second steeping of both these teas. You can see the Gyokuro Cha Musume really started to go into the green direction, and the Saemidori Sencha is still kind of hanging on in that golden yellow. But it really picked up kind of like this fluorescent quality, I thought, so it's really cool. It's like a glowing yellowish green color. Very interesting, but it's not like that Fukumushi Sencha you see where it gets really jade green in the second infusion. Let's go ahead and have a quick taste. So first, the Cha Musume. Interesting, that floral note's really coming out. Kind of the sweetness, the savoriness is subsiding a little bit. So perhaps these two teas are kind of on level ground now, but we'll see. Very interesting. This tea starts to almost taste like a genmaicha. It really went all in on that kind of cereal flavor. So it's like a lot of that sweet corn, yeah, a little bit of that kind of genmaicha cereal flavor. If you told me this was a genmaicha, I might believe you. It's really drifting into this kind of toasted rice direction. And then this one is really committing to that floral note. So this gets even flowery even more flowery in the second infusion. So both of them are tending to lose their sweetness in the first infusion, but that's typical. Usually you have like a Japanese green tea starts out really sweet and smooth in the first infusion. In the second infusion, it starts to lean more into the steamed vegetable notes, or kind of like the secondary taste characteristics, which in this case are the flowery notes, and in this case are the kind of cereal, toasted rice, sweet corn notes. So I would say that if you're just starting out into the world of Japanese green tea, you're probably not going to be used to these intense, like sweet and savory flavors that you'd get for a Gyokuro. Personally, Gyokuro is my favorite tea, but Sencha is probably a little bit better place to start if you're just starting out. If you've already had a few Japanese green teas and you're really looking to kind of take it to the next level, definitely go for the Gyokuro, because it's going to be a taste experience unlike anything you've had before. Really nothing else compares to it in terms of this kind of savory or umami flavor. It's something that takes a really long time to develop during the production process. And it's a really, really special thing to experience at least once. So this one's definitely better for beginners. The Henta Saemidori Sencha. This is one of our most popular teas. And then if you're kind of more of an experienced tea connoisseur and you're looking to try something new, definitely go for a Gyokuro, because that's going to really level up your tea tasting experience. So I hope you all enjoyed this tasting. I really enjoyed doing it. I learned a lot personally about these teas, even though I felt like I knew a lot about them to begin with. So definitely good for me to continue doing these tastings, because I learn a little something each time. But thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have any questions about Gyokuro, Sencha, or green tea in general, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. And until then, we'll see you next time.